Why quiet women dominate. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you a story. A few years ago, I was invited to speak at a leadership conference. After my talk, a woman came up to me, soft-spoken, almost hesitant. She said, "Thank you. I've always felt that because I'm not loud, I'm not seen. But today, I realized maybe I've been leading all along, just differently." That hit me. You see, we live in a world that celebrates the loudest voice in the room, the boldest pitch, the fastest decision maker. But what if domination didn't look like that? What if it was quieter, deeper, more intentional? In a world that often equates leadership with charisma, volume, and visibility, we've developed a bias, one that favors the loudest voice in the room. We've been taught, directly or indirectly, that to lead is to speak up, to take charge, to dominate space with confidence that fills the air. But that perspective misses something vital. It overlooks the quiet women. Quiet women are often underestimated, not because they lack power, but because their power doesn't show up in the traditional ways. They don't shout, they don't demand attention, they don't force their presence, and yet, if you look closely, they are leading every single day in ways that are thoughtful, impactful, and deeply intentional. The depth of their leadership is their superpower. While others are quick to speak, they are listening. While others are reacting, they are processing. Quiet women take time to absorb the context, to understand the emotions in the room, to connect the dots that others miss. They are tuned in not to the noise, but to what lies beneath it. This is a form of intelligence that doesn't always show up on the surface, but it's there, shaping outcomes and influencing direction. And when they do speak, you notice, because quiet women don't waste words. They've been watching, they've been thinking, and when they contribute, it's meaningful, it's grounded, it's not just opinion, it's insight. There's a gravity to their voice precisely because it's not always heard. They don't need to dominate the conversation. They wait until they have something worth saying, and then they say it in a way that resonates. This kind of presence isn't loud, but it's incredibly powerful. It creates space for others. It invites trust. People are drawn to quiet women because they don't come with ego. They come with clarity. And in a world overloaded with information, ego, and noise, clarity is rare. It's magnetic. Leadership through depth means you're leading from a place of purpose, not performance. You're not trying to impress, you're trying to contribute. Quiet women often lead with questions rather than answers. They are curious, not commanding. They build understanding before making decisions. They seek to include rather than override. These are not weaknesses, they are marks of wisdom. And yet, because this style of leadership doesn't match the mold we've traditionally celebrated, it's often overlooked. We call it reserved or soft-spoken as if those are flaws. But if we paid closer attention, we'd realize that these so-called quiet qualities are exactly what great leadership looks like: patience, reflection, humility, precision. It's not about being silent, it's about choosing your words carefully. Knowing your value doesn't depend on how often you're heard, but on the truth of what you say and the integrity behind your actions. Quiet women don't push themselves forward because they're too busy lifting others. They aren't interested in being the loudest voice. They're committed to being the wisest. They don't strive to be seen. They focus on being effective. And the impact they make, it's lasting. It may not come with fireworks, but it's felt in the culture they create, the trust they build, the change they inspire. In a world that rewards noise, it's easy to miss the leaders who speak softly, but make no mistake, they are leading. And often, they're the ones guiding us in the most meaningful direction. Influence is often mistaken for presence. We assume the person talking the most, commanding the room, taking up space, is the one with the greatest impact. But real influence is rarely that loud. In fact, the most influential people are often the ones who speak less, but with more clarity. Quiet women embody this truth beautifully. They don't use 10 words when 5 will do. They don't rush to fill silence just to be heard. Instead, they wait, they process, and when they speak, it's with clarity that cuts through the noise. And that's why people pay attention. Because they're not performing, they're communicating. We live in a world flooded with opinions, statements, debates, and constant updates. Everyone seems to be talking, but the more voices there are, the harder it is to distinguish what truly matters. In this landscape, the person who can offer clarity becomes invaluable. Quiet women tend to bring this gift naturally. They don't just speak, they offer insight. They don't contribute for the sake of contribution, they speak with purpose, and that's the difference. Clarity doesn't mean always having the right answer. It means being anchored in what matters. It means knowing the why behind your words and actions. Quiet women often take time to ask themselves these questions before they enter the conversation. They're not in a rush to react because they're more interested in understanding, and that understanding gives them something incredibly rare: perspective. When a quiet woman speaks in a meeting, you often see people pause, not because she demands it, but because people know it's going to be worth listening to. That moment of silence, that attention, it's earned through noise. It's earned through consistency, presence, and a reputation for speaking with intention. This kind of influence doesn't need a spotlight. In fact, it thrives without it. Quiet women don't seek attention, they seek effectiveness. And because they're not chasing the moment, their words often resonate long after the conversation ends. It's not flash. It's substance. Think about the people in your life who've made the biggest difference, the ones who made you feel seen, heard, understood. Chances are they weren't the ones shouting at the front of the room. They were the ones who listened deeply and then said something that changed the way you saw yourself or the world. That's clarity. That's influence. And it doesn't require volume. It requires courage, the courage to stay true to yourself when the world rewards noise. It requires patience, the patience to wait until what you have to say is really worth saying. And it requires humility to know that you don't have to speak often to speak powerfully. When we talk about influence, we often look for charisma, for energy, for visibility. But influence is really about connection, and clarity creates connection. People are drawn to those who make things easier to understand, who help them make sense of complexity, who speak with calm in the midst of chaos. Quiet women do that, not by raising their voices, but by grounding them. They remind us that leadership isn't about being everywhere. It's about being right here, fully present with something real to offer. Their influence is not temporary. It doesn't fade when the applause ends. It lingers. Because clarity lingers, it stays with people. It shapes decisions. It guides others forward. And in a world that's louder than ever, we don't need more volume. We need more clarity. Trust is not built in grand moments. It's not a result of perfect speeches, polished presentations, or flashy charisma. It's built in the quiet, in the day-to-day, in the pauses between the noise, and more often than not, it's built by those who aren't performing, but simply showing up with presence and authenticity. Quiet women have an extraordinary capacity for creating trust, not because they're trying to impress, but because they're present. They're not rehearsing a script in their heads while you talk. They're listening fully. And we feel that. We know the difference between someone waiting to speak and someone truly hearing us. That difference creates connection, and connection is the foundation of trust. In a world where so many people are performing, trying to prove, trying to win, trying to be seen, quiet women offer something different. They offer stillness. They offer focus. They offer sincerity. And it's in that space that others feel safe. Safety is a crucial part of trust. We trust people who make us feel safe enough to be ourselves, who don't rush to judge or fix or control. Quiet women often lead with empathy, not ego. They're not trying to dominate the room, they're trying to understand it. And because they're not competing for attention, they create space for others to show up more fully. That too builds trust. They don't need to prove they're the smartest in the room. They don't need to interrupt to validate their importance. Their value is felt, not forced. That kind of quiet confidence is disarming. It lowers people's defenses and it opens the door to real human conversations. We often confuse leadership with performance. We think the one who appears the most on must be the most capable. But over time, we begin to see through that. We begin to crave realness, not rehearsed leadership, but honest presence. We want to know who we're really following. We want to feel that they care, that they're steady, that they'll show up even when no one's watching. Quiet women tend to do exactly that. They show up consistently, not dramatically. They follow through. They remember what you said last time. They ask how you're really doing, not just out of politeness, but because they care. These small moments add up. And that's how trust is truly formed. Not with a bang, but with the slow, steady rhythm of presence over time. There's something deeply grounding about being around someone who isn't trying to impress you, someone who's just there fully. Quiet women don't rush to take up space, but they make every moment count. Their presence is felt not because they're loud, but because they're real. And here's the thing. People don't follow the loudest leader. They follow the one they trust the most, the one who sees them, the one who respects them, the one who shows up again and again with calm, clarity, and care. Trust doesn't ask for theatrics, it asks for truth. And that's what quiet women offer. They remind us that presence is powerful, that you don't have to perform to lead, that simply being there, really being there, is sometimes the most important kind of leadership there is. And in a world that so often feels rushed, distracted, and performative, that kind of leadership doesn't just stand out, it stands strong. There's a fundamental difference between commanding attention and earning respect. Attention is immediate, it's reactive, surface level, and often short-lived. Respect, on the other hand, it's slow burning. It's cultivated over time. It's not demanded, it's deserved. Quiet women understand this difference. More importantly, they embody it. We live in a time where being noticed is often seen as the ultimate achievement. Social media and entertainment, even business environments reward visibility. The louder you are, the more eyes you attract. But attention is not the same as influence. And it's certainly not the same as leadership. Quiet women don't chase attention. They don't walk into a room needing to be the loudest, flashiest, or most assertive person there. Instead, they carry themselves with intention. Their energy says, I'm here because I have something to offer, not something to prove. And that is precisely why they are respected. Respect is rooted in character. It's earned through consistency, humility, and depth. Quiet women often move with grace, not bravado. They don't inflate their presence to feel important. They don't dominate conversations to feel heard. Their strength comes from within, and that kind of self-assurance is unmistakable. People respect quiet women because they are grounded. They're not easily shaken by ego or insecurity. They know who they are, they know what they value, and they lead from that place. That kind of inner clarity has a presence all its own, a calm authority that doesn't need to be shouted to be seen. And when they do speak, people listen, not out of obligation, but out of interest, because quiet women speak with purpose. Their words are thoughtful, deliberate, and often carry more weight because they're not tossed around casually. They don't talk to fill space, they speak to add value. It's rare, and it's respected. They also lead with respect for others. They don't step on people to get ahead. They don't treat others as competition, but as collaborators. They ask questions, they listen to understand, they make room for other voices. That humility and mutual respect creates an environment where people want to follow, not because they have to, but because they choose to. There's also something deeply admirable about a woman who isn't driven by external validation. Quiet women don't perform for approval. They don't shift their values to match the room. They stay true to themselves, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's unpopular. That kind of integrity is magnetic. It may not get applause right away, but it leaves a lasting impression. And here's the paradox. By not trying to be the center of attention, quiet women often become the most respected people in the room. Because respect is about trust, it's about consistency, it's about knowing that someone will show up not with theatrics, but with truth. Quiet women remind us that leadership is not about being followed out of fear or flash. It's about being followed out of belief. Belief in who you are, how you lead, and the values you carry. They may not raise their voices, but their presence speaks volumes. They may not seek the spotlight, but they shine exactly where they stand. In a world addicted to attention, they choose something deeper. They choose to earn respect quietly, steadily, and powerfully. And that kind of leadership doesn't fade with time. It endures. Leadership has never truly been about control. Control may look like leadership on the surface, directing people, managing outcomes, being the loudest or most forceful in the room. But real leadership is something else entirely. It's not about overpowering people. It's about empowering them. It's not about being in charge of everyone. It's about being responsible for the people you serve. Quiet women understand this. In fact, they often lead from this exact place, a place not of control, but of impact. They don't need to dominate. They're not interested in hierarchy for its own sake. They're not driven by power over others. They're driven by the desire to make something better. Whether it's a team, a culture, a community, or a cause. And that's what makes their leadership so effective and so deeply human. Impact, unlike control, is not about force. It's about influence. And influence, the real kind, can't be demanded. It's earned through presence, trust, consistency, and care. Quiet women earn it not by shouting louder, but by showing up more intentionally. They focus less on being in control of people and more on inspiring people to take ownership of their own work, their own decisions, their own growth. There's a quiet strength in that approach. It takes humility to let go of the need to control and instead choose to guide, to mentor, to uplift. Quiet women don't micromanage. They don't try to be the smartest person in the room. They ask questions, they invite dialogue, they give others space to contribute and shine, and in doing so, they create more than followers, they create leaders. That's real impact. We've all experienced the difference between a boss who controls and a leader who empowers. One creates tension, the other builds trust. One focuses on obedience, the other nurtures ownership. One protects their ego, the other protects the mission. Quiet women are often mission-driven. They care deeply about the why. They lead with values, not vanity. And that focus allows them to make decisions not from fear of losing control, but from a desire to serve the greater good. That kind of leadership lasts. Because while control can generate short-term compliance, only impact builds long-term change. And the irony is this: the less they try to control, the more influence they actually have. Because people are drawn to leaders who make them feel seen, people respond to leaders who trust them, people are more likely to give their best, not to someone barking orders, but to someone who believes in them, who listens, supports, and leads with integrity. Quiet women often lead from behind, pushing others forward, spotlighting their strengths, cheering their success. And yet their fingerprints are on everything, not because they took over, but because they lifted others up. That's impact. So no, they may not always sit at the head of the table. They may not demand to be in charge, but make no mistake, they are leading not with a heavy hand, but with a steady heart. And that kind of leadership changes things. It changes teams, it changes outcomes, it changes lives. True leadership is not measured by how much control you have, it's measured by how much better people become because of your presence. And quiet women, they lead with that kind of power, the kind that can't be forced, the kind that leaves a mark long after they've left the room. We live in a world that's constantly buzzing. Notifications, headlines, conversations, opinions, noise is everywhere. We've become conditioned to believe that the loudest voice wins, that if we're not talking, posting, performing, or constantly visible, we'll be forgotten. But here's the paradox. In a loud world, quiet doesn't get drowned out, quiet stands out. And that's why quiet women are magnetic, not because they compete with the noise, but because they rise above it. There's something about stillness that catches our attention. It's unexpected. It's powerful without trying to be. When someone walks into a room and doesn't demand attention, but carries themselves with calm and confidence, you notice. Not because they force you to, but because your instincts say, there's something different about her. Quiet women don't pull focus with energy, they draw it in with intention. There's a gravity to the way they move, the way they speak, the way they observe. They don't rush, they don't interrupt, they don't need to fill space with noise. And yet, somehow you lean in when they begin to speak. Not out of habit, but out of genuine curiosity. Because when someone doesn't speak just to be heard, what they do say tends to matter more. In a world of constant projection, of curated images, endless talking, nonstop promotion, quiet women offer something refreshing: presence. Not performance, not pretense, just presence. And in today's world, presence is rare, it's valuable, and it's magnetic. We are naturally drawn to authenticity. We're drawn to people who make us feel safe, grounded, seen. Quiet women do that simply by being who they are. They don't try to be someone else. They're not molding themselves to fit into what the world expects from a leader or a woman or a success story. They lead from within. That kind of self-possession, that inner alignment, is felt deeply by everyone around them. And here's the thing, loud isn't always confident. In fact, a lot of noise is just a cover for insecurity. But quiet women are comfortable in their own silence. They're not trying to impress. They're rooted in what matters. They listen before they speak. They think before they act. And that depth creates a kind of mystery, a kind of magnetism that you can't fake. They're the ones you find yourself watching in a meeting, not because they've said the most, but because when they do say something, it shifts the energy. They're the ones people come to for clarity when the room gets chaotic. They're the ones whose calm is contagious. And the truth is, we're tired of the noise. We're tired of being shouted at, sold to, overwhelmed. What we crave now more than ever is substance, thoughtfulness, depth, integrity, and quiet. Women offer all of that without ever having to raise their voices. Their power is not in their volume. It's in their presence, their alignment, their consistency. Their quiet is not absence, it's strength under control. It's confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. So in a world addicted to loud, quiet women don't try to compete.